Welcome to the Factal Forecast, a look at the week's biggest stories and what they mean from the editors at Factal. I'm Jimmy Lovaas. Today is August 27th, and in this week's forecast, we've got arson attacks in Thailand, a voting rights march in Washington, D.C., a constitutional referendum in Guinea-Bissau, the start of the U.S. Open, and a presidential election in Estonia. You can also read about these stories and more in our weekly newsletter, which you'll find a link to in the show notes. Up first, we'll take a look at the coordinated arson attacks in southern Thailand. For more on that, I've got fellow Factal editor, Halima Mansoor. Hi, Halima.
Hey, Jimmy.
Well, Halima, let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right into the story. What can you tell us about these attacks?
So there were dozens of incidents involving arson, explosions, and vandalism in southern Thailand between the night of August 22nd and August 24th. Most of these attacks were concentrated in Narathiwat, Yala, and Pattani provinces. These were sort of varied in the sense that they targeted buildings, vehicles, a train track somewhere, electricity poles, surveillance equipment, a few shops. So far, 3 people have been reported injured, which is surprising considering the widespread violence. Since then, the government has imposed curfews and the military is on the ground investigating.
Well, what's the latest? Have you seen any new developments?
The Thai government has beefed up security in those 3 provinces, as well as in Songkhla and Satun. In the past, these attacks were followed by very harsh crackdowns, but we aren't seeing that at this point. From all accounts, it seems authorities are still investigating. A few people have been arrested, but no one has claimed responsibility. And this particular area, these are Muslim majority provinces, and they've been facing a separatist insurgency for decades now. But not all of these attacks are followed by claims of responsibility. The Muslims in those provinces have accused the Thai government over the years of discrimination and neglect. And it seems after the recent unrest, there were reports of the government planning to approve some 200 new development projects in the region. And of course, I can't say if this is in direct response to the weekend attacks or if these will even materialize. But this is where we sort of stand in terms of actions on the ground.
Well, what sort of reactions have you seen to the situation?
The domestic reaction so far has been one of politicians blaming the government and also the military for not being prepared. I saw a report that the spokesperson for the Thai Senate Committee on Military Affairs called on the military to explain why there was no local intelligence, something that could have allowed the interception of suspects or prevented the attacks altogether. There were also questions around whether the deployment of troops was appropriate or not, whether they were pulled from different regions, which created intelligence gaps. No one so far has directly blamed the main insurgent group, the BRN, which is linked to the separatist insurgency. And we're just keeping an eye to see if the government or others point to them.
Well, speaking about keeping an eye out, what should people be watching for next?
Well, the Thai government is currently divided between responding to flooding in the north and these attacks and incidents in the south. And pulled in 2 different directions might leave a window for more attacks. We haven't seen more, though, since the spate over the weekend. I would expect the region will remain under harsher scrutiny for a while, and there's always a possibility that a large crackdown will follow like we have seen in the past. In the past, we've seen the military acting there more like a martial law regime with similar powers, but so far we're just watching to see if that ends up happening.
Well, Halima, as usual, that's where we'll pause for today, but thank you so much for your time and for getting us all caught up on the situation in Thailand. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Jimmy.
Thousands of people are expected to take to the streets of Washington, D.C. tomorrow. They're marching in support of voting rights on the 63rd anniversary of the March on Washington. Civil rights leaders announced plans for the march earlier this summer. That following court decisions that organizers say have weakened federal protections against racial discrimination in voting. Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network called on people to stand to protect our democracy, defend our civil rights, and continue the work of those who marched before us. Participants will be gathering at the Lincoln Memorial on the National Mall before the start of the event on Friday morning. Now, authorities have not announced any traffic impacts specifically associated with the march, but advisories remain in effect for several streets due to last weekend's Freedom 250 Grand Prix. Organizers stressed that tomorrow's march is planned as a safe, welcoming, and family-friendly gathering that is rooted in nonviolence. March marshals and other volunteers will be on site to support the safety of the event and to answer questions. Guinea-Bissau's military government will hold a national referendum on Sunday. The referendum is to change the country's constitution and comes after years of instability and less than a year after the military seized power in the midst of a disputed general election. Of course, last year's coup came after multiple failed ones against ex-President Umaro Sissoco Embalo, who refused to leave office at the end of his term earlier in 2025. Coup leader General Horta Natam is presiding over the referendum, which would change the constitution to consolidate power in the hands of the president instead of the prime minister and legislature. The process is being criticized by human rights groups as unconstitutional and marks the latest in the struggle over power in the former Portuguese colony. Now, in addition to giving the president power to fire the prime minister and dissolve parliament, the new constitution would also reduce the size of the legislature and the constituencies it represents. There are concerns that would undercut political opposition and eliminate most checks on presidential power. The singles portion of the final Grand Slam tennis tournament of the year will begin Sunday. It's happening at the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in the Queensboro of New York City. Qualifying and mixed doubles have been going on since August 23rd. The 2025 edition of the Open shattered attendance records, drawing more than 1.14 million fans over 3 weeks to New York City for the second consecutive year. That's 500,000 more than the 645,000 that World Cup soccer brought to the city. Of course, there have been some complaints over the high ticket prices. Accordingly, the tournament announced, in partnership with New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, that 1,000 tickets would be released at more affordable prices for city residents. Now, typical security preparations figure to bring major disruptions to the area. Road closures are expected to affect major thoroughfares like the Grand Central Parkway and the Long Island Expressway, as well as local streets. And while no specific disruption is anticipated this year, previous Opens have seen small protests against the event's sponsors nearby. If such protests occur this year, they could be larger in scope considering the sharp rise in global tensions. As you may recall, the 2023 U.S. Open semifinal was delayed nearly 50 minutes when a climate protester glued themselves to the floor in the stands. Estonia's 101-member parliament will vote for a president on Wednesday. It's a ceremonial role currently held by Alar Karis. Chancellor of Justice Ulla Medise is the only registered candidate for the election, nominated by 75 government and opposition members of parliament. Nomination prospects for other candidates fizzled out earlier in August, with no clear route to securing the 21 votes needed to run. Medise needs at least 68 votes to be elected, which she is expected to swing as a consensus candidate. Should she fail to secure the required two-thirds support, unprecedented under the current system, a new round of candidate nominations should take place, followed by another round of voting. Now, the 2021 presidential election drew criticism for only having one candidate, which at the time was unprecedented. Lawmakers at the time called for direct elections, comparing the indirect vote to a Soviet-era artifact. Those calls, however, did not translate into action. Finally, while Russian interference in elections via misinformation is somewhat feared in the Baltic nation, Estonia is also an EU member, and any Russian meddling is unlikely to play a role under the current indirect structure. As always, thank you for listening to the Factal Forecast. We publish our forward-looking podcast and newsletter each Thursday to help you get a jump start on the week ahead. Please subscribe and review wherever you find your podcasts, and we'd love it if you'd consider telling a friend about us. Today's episode includes work from Factal editors Teresa Seeger, Ahmed Namatala, Matthew Hippolito, and Halima Mansoor. Our interview featured editor Halima Mansoor, and our podcast is produced and edited by me, Jimmy Lovaas. Our music comes courtesy of Andrew Gosby. Until next time, if you have any feedback, suggestions, or events we missed, drop us a note by emailing hello@factal.com.